Todd, you literally got off a plane like 3 hours ago.
Yeah. I went from running in the snow in New York to sweating my brains out in Australia.
Todd's here to set up and deploy Kagami, which is a mixed reality experience with Ryuichi Sakamoto, the very famous Japanese musician, artist, polymath, amazing.
Yeah.
And Aisha Topa asked, helped us bring this to life here. We thought it'd be great for Todd and I to have a bit of a chat about some of the stuff about mixed reality and the making of Kagami. And Todd and I got on a call maybe a week ago, two weeks ago.
I think it was longer than that because I was in upstate. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Anyway, recently-ish, and we were like, we're just going to wing it. Todd's going to be off the plane, and he's promised to go behind the scenes pretty deeply, and he's shared some photos that have never been seen before in public. He was airdropping these to me over a coffee maybe an hour ago, which was great.
Well, but it's the point of doing something like this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so none of this is canned. We're not sure what we're going to wind up talking about, but I figure this is the first time for this work to be seen in Australia. I think it's the first large-scale exhibition of mixed reality that has been on this continent. So why not try to do something special with this, which is truly the initiation of the whole process. So sharing things that nobody's ever seen before, and I probably won't share again, is just a way of saying, hi, I'm really happy to be here.
So Todd, this whole journey with Ryuichi Sakamoto begins here.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
2019, Thundercat, who's a friend, Daida Manabe, who's a friend, Ryuichi, and this was actually after what would be Ryuichi's last concert ever. We didn't know it at the time, of course, and it was a concert that he was doing as a favor because he promised the founder of Ace Hotels that he'd do it, and Ryuichi would never renege on a promise. And so even though that person had passed, Ryuichi played this fantastic solo piano concert in the theater of the Ace Hotel, and it was here that we started talking meaningfully about what would it mean to do a mixed reality performance and a presentation, and what does mixed reality even mean?
And then Ryuichi turns up at your place.
Yeah, that's my apartment in the city, and so Ryuichi is actually wearing a Magic Leap 1 headset, and he's looking at the piece that we did with Marina Abramovic that opened at the Serpentine Galleries, and this was a couple of weeks before COVID hit. And we were kind of joking about it. You think it was going to be a big deal? I don't know. But we were talking about whether or not what he did would translate to this medium. Like, are we going to be able to do something? Is it not going to be redundant to the concerts that he was planning? And we sat around and we were really commiserating. And you know how you'll have those moments where you say something with absolute clarity, but you'd never said it before, you had never planned it, it just sort of happened. And we're sitting around the dining room table, and we've been together talking for like, I don't know, 6 hours or something. And I said, look, as the director of this piece, what I want to do is not simply to fulfill the expectations of your fans. What I'm looking to do is to connect you with a different audience, an evolving audience. I said, my choices are going to be to put you in a meaningful way with a bunch of people that haven't even been born yet. And Ryuichi looked at me and he went, wow. And that was the moment we were doing it.
So let's have a look at what this turned out to be. This is in Manchester Festival.
Oh yeah, well, and does like the term mixed reality, does that mean anything to you guys? Because I mean,
I think for this audience,
well, no,
Okay,
but because
yeah.
it's really funny because there was a speech that I did in Hong Kong at an art and tech thing with Christie's, and I didn't fully explain it, and afterwards people said, "Yeah, we got no idea what you're talking about." And you guys probably do, but mixed reality is ostensibly wearing a device like what Ryuichi is seeing, and there's no screen. So the content becomes part of the world, and that doesn't really make any sense. And if you think about it, the content, in this case, he's looking at a volumetrically captured performance by Marina, and so that performance is dimensional. Volumetric capture is an array of cameras pointed inwards. We would shoot Ryuichi with 48. So it captures the form and a photographic mesh on the form. Here is a picture of once we were actually doing it. Note the telltale COVID mask. But so this process, what it essentially means is if traditional film, wonderful as it is a flat version of whatever the camera is pointed at. And so that is, it becomes an artifact of something that you weren't actually there to see. And volumetric capture and looking through a screenless wearable device means that your agency, the determinism that you are using right now. So you could choose to look at us, you could choose to look at something else, but what is meaningful is up to you. And the idea was to capture a performance with that same relationship intact.
Let's play this. Let's play some of.
This is so we opened simultaneously at the Shed in New York and at the Manchester International Festival, which was in retrospect really, really stupid.
So let's play some of this. This is 4 minutes long.
It's like a 4-minute thing. This was when we made Control. The idea of making a film about a band that was so important to Manchester, there were a lot of people that thought, well, these two American idiots, they can't be sincere. And so Stephen Chapman, who shot this for me later, was working for Granada, and he actually came in so he could meet us and show us up. And then he found out that we were really, really very serious about making an authentic film about Ian Curtis, and we've been friends ever since. So when we were presenting this in Manchester, he and a photographer, they shot this work, and it's really hard to elucidate a 3-dimensional experience through a 2-dimensional medium. How do you do that? And they, I think, did an exceptionally good job.
So this experience begins with you walking into a space where you contextualized about Ryuichi. And I think what's fascinating is the people there who had glasses got specific lenses to go. So the headset would be calibrated for your particular vision needs. Then everybody sits in a circle, is fitted with their Magic Leap device.
Right.
And then it comes to life. So I'm just turning the audio up now.
So by the way, when you go to Kagami, you may be wondering what that sound is that you hear in the background here. Ryuichi started playing piano when he was a child. And he heard Bach when he was 7. And he was fascinated by the idea that anybody composed leading with the left. And so the last thing that he ever worked on was slowing down himself playing Bach into a drone. And that's what you hear when you walk into the induction space. This is the show itself. And so basically they're all looking at Ryuichi in the middle of that mandala. And he has been captured and produced so that it is an authentic experience and they can see him as if he was in the room, despite the fact that he died 2 months before we opened in New York.
So being mixed reality too, people can walk around, get up and walk around without bumping into each other.
Right. A lot of people like to sit at his feet and watch what he's doing with the delay pedal. Actually, Alice Sarah Ott, a fantastic classical pianist, I showed it to her before we opened, and I was terrified. I'm actually always terrified when anybody watches my show, but to have somebody that talented watching what we made, I thought, oh God, what if she doesn't like it? We're like opening in 3 weeks. But she did. So you'll notice that quite a few people look like they're crying. It actually happens a lot. It's a weirdly emotional thing because these are not necessarily even people who were aware of Ryuichi before this show. Oh, and everybody claps at the end, which is brilliant.
So mixed reality seems to capture that social element of performance very well in a way that VR perhaps didn't, yeah?
Well, because it's a completely different set of circumstances. What you bring into the room, we always think of, okay, you've got a kind of give and take, an exchange between performer and audience, and you do, but what if the audience, every single time, it becomes a kind of exchange between the different members? So for example, if you go and see it, you'll start off, there'll be 100 of you in a circle. And that was a kind of an answer to make everybody understand that it wasn't faked, that all of them is there and he's going to stay there and you can walk around him as if he was there. And so if it's the first show of the day, Manchester's a good example. Generally, you had quite a few hungover people in there. So you would have a very quiet, kind of solemn event. Equally, in Manchester or when we were in London at the Roundhouse, towards the end of the day, you'd have some pretty drunk people and they would be dancing and then they would be perhaps crying. And it was a completely different energy and you never know. And I'm always surprised by the audiences and how they respond to this thing for which the world doesn't even really have a vocabulary. As we discussed, mixed reality, what is it? Oh, and this is a picture I've never actually shown anybody. But so there's all these protocols that you have to go through, particularly between songs, between takes, to make sure that what you're getting is going to be as good as possible. So you actually have to fiddle with the performer each time. It's like, okay, are the hairs in place? Is your makeup? Do you have any shiny bits? Whatever. So I think he grew really tired of me. It's like, yeah, I know. Okay, yeah, the hair's fine.
I mean, producing this work, how long is the performance when we all go and see it in Melbourne?
So it's a little under an hour. It's 10 songs, 2 introductions, and 2 of the songs are quite unique. there's one song called "The Seed and the Sower." I think I may have given you a picture of it. So "The Seed and the Sower," Ryuichi and I were talking about what songs we wanted to include, and he had a career that spanned over 50 years, and he composed some of the most iconic, astonishing melodies that anybody ever wrote. And so there was a massive kind of greatest hits collection that you could draw from, but then I wanted things that were different, maybe that people hadn't heard. "The Seed and the Sower" is a song from the Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence soundtrack, and it's kind of violent. If you've seen the film, it's really quite violent, but it represents a kind of banging on the piano. And what I wanted to do with it was, when he was touring BTTB, Back to the Basics, he was playing in rock clubs. Like I saw him in LA the day after I saw the Cramps in the same room. And in the middle of it, he kind of did this John Cage thing where he walked over to the strings, and he took a mallet and he banged on them for a second. And that was not disrespectful to the instrument. It was his way of saying, this is not a recital. This is something else. And so I wanted "The Seed and the Sower" to represent that same sense of disruption. And so when I told him that, he said, "Okay, I will do it." What he didn't tell me is he had never played it live. So that is a unique experience. The other is the conclusion of the show. So New York during COVID was a pretty grim place. And Ryuichi lived in the Village, and we met in August across the street in this wonderful restaurant called Cafe Cluny. And so I wanted something to conclude the show, but like, if you think about encores, if they're real, if an encore is genuine, then it's a moment of discovery and you can feel it. It's like this extra bit that you didn't know that you were going to get. Nobody knew, and it just sort of happened, and you kind of take it with you. But this is recorded, so you can't do that, because all of that kind of faked, all right, we're going to go off, we're going to come back, and it's an encore, it's great. But so I said, do you have a song that nobody's ever heard? And he said, I'll think about it. And so on the second day of shooting, we only had 3, he said, oh, you wanted a song that nobody had ever heard. And he runs to this bag, and he pulls out a piece of sheet music. And he says, that stands for BB. And that's Bernardo Bertolucci. He was like a spiritual father to me. When I got the call that he had passed, I went into my studio and I played how I felt about him. The only people who have ever heard this song are his family at the funeral. Will that work? And you're like, yeah, that'll really work. And so that concludes the show. And so those are things that you can't necessarily get in any other way. But dramatic music is wonderful.
I wanted to ask, and someone's asking in the chat too, headsets. Magic Leap, there's a Magic Leap headset. So they are comparatively light compared to some of the other VR sets.
Yeah.
But also their sound. This is so reliant on really good sound quality. Tell us.
So like if you go into technical tests of the sound, you'll find that the high end is very good in the devices and the low end is lacking, which is not really surprising. So what we do, D&B Audio out of Germany, created a kind of circular rig which would give a sense of presence to the piano, because Zach, who was the audio engineer during the capture and who worked with Ryuichi for decades, he managed to create a level of sonic intimacy that it's actually impossible to explain. You have to hear it, and that is reflected in the sound. So the show itself sounds astonishingly good.
And the headsets? Tell us about the headset. I mean, if you were thinking about what is still lacking from the headset, what could make this even better?
Well, so when you make anything new, it's really a pain in the ass because you don't actually have the ability to rely on what other people have already done. So for these headsets, for example, I had worked at Magic Leap. I had left in 2016 to start Tin Drum, but the relationship was still very good. And they say to you, well, we've done a lot of things to improve the second version of the headset. You know, great. They said, we improved battery life. It's got a really long battery life. So we tested it. It doesn't. It's 2 hours. And they said, well, but we've got rapid charging. They don't. It's 1 for 1. So with all of it, and given the fact that there's not really any post-production tools. By the way, before I go deeper into this, so one thing that I've talked about this show a lot, but I've never had the ability to actually give a shout out to a guy without whom the show never would have happened. And that's Matt Hermans, who's sitting here in the second row. Actually here, I've never been able to applaud you. So Matt lives in Sydney, and okay, I'm going to tell you a quick technical story. So Ryuichi found out he had cancer, that it was back the morning that we started shooting, and this was I can't even tell you. It was impossible. I don't know how he did 3 days worth of shooting, but he did. And he didn't tell me that he had found out that morning, but all of a sudden, the songs, which I knew very well, and I had seen him many times. I mean, I actually knew Ryuichi from the 90s, but so the songs were slower, and where he would normally play with his head up, his head was leaning forward. Now, from an emotional perspective, you can feel everything that he's putting into every note. But from a technological perspective, that means the grand piano, we were shooting on a piano that was made for him. It was occluding his face for probably, 30% of the shots? And so you only had camera coverage on the side. And Matt led the charge to do something nobody had ever done before, which was a dimensional reconstruction of his face, which, when occluded, sort of looked like when you roast hazelnuts and they split in the middle. And so Matt figured out a way to utilize data sets that were complete to inform those that were not. Because 12 days after we wrapped, Ryuichi went into the hospital and he would not come out for 14 months. So we knew we had the last footage possible. We weren't going to get another shot at this. So we either made it work or we didn't. And thankfully we did. So that's the Australian connection of the production.
So I wanted to ask some more questions about the production. We'll do the production and then we'll do the presentation elements of this. The 3-day shoot.
3-day shoot.
Post-production of a while.
Years. Well, but COVID years.
COVID years. So are they longer or are they shorter? I don't
well, well, actually, I mean, what's funny about this is, so we had decided at that meeting in my apartment that we were going to shoot it in December because there were only 2 studios where the volumetric capture capabilities were at the highest in the world. And both were made by a French company called 4D Views, which is based in Grenoble. And so you could either go to Grenoble, which is actually also a pain, or you could go to Crescent Studios in Tokyo. And so we decided to do it there because it was logical. And Ryuichi was in an incredible demand as a composer. He was just a very busy guy. And so then we're supposed to shoot it in Japan, and then the whole world is stopped. And so there's no way that I can get my staff there. I can only get me, the director, and that happened as a favor from a Japanese government official whom I will not out in this forum. But so I was the first American that had been put on a plane at JFK to go to Japan since COVID. And I show up in Narita. They've got no idea what to do with me. It's like, you're not supposed to be here. And so 2 weeks of quarantine, isolation. And then, so it's a 65-person staff that Daito Manabe, the guy that you saw before there, had assembled with Rhizomatics, 2 translators, and basically we had to get it all at once, and did.
Can you tell us a bit about the budget for this? Because from the outside, this looks like this is a very expensive, big production. But in our discussions, it felt, not perhaps what people might expect it might have cost.
Well, it wound up being about $7 million. And so people, if you speak to people that do Broadway shows, they say, God, that was cheap. For all the rest of us, it's a fortune. It was really, really hard to put together, particularly given that it's a completely untested medium. Nobody had ever tried to do this before. And so that much money, and we had to buy all the devices in order to make the shows work. And again, just trying to get people to understand what this is, it was just a very, very involved process from which we learned enough that we can do them now, I think, for far less money. But this was just a matter of being really bloody-minded and deciding that we were going to find a way to make it work.
And so festival-wise, in terms of presenting this, you've got 100 people at a time.
Yeah.
So that's 100 headsets.
Yeah.
Running with a 2-hour lifespan, and it's a 1-hour show.
Yeah, but it's doubled.
So you need twice as many.
That's right. Well, you need twice as many, and you need
some spares.
Yeah, and you need 20% over that for the ones that give you a hard time, and you need to fix at the end of the day.
240 Magic Leaps headsets
that are sitting here in Melbourne right now.
That's a lot of headsets.
It's a whole bunch of headsets. And the people that make those inserts that you saw, they're very proud of them. That's a lot of money for them too. It's very weird.
When we were talking earlier on, we were talking about this sort of challenge where the venues to present these kinds of new types of media experiences, or with new mediums. It takes sometimes decades or years for those to develop to make those economies of scale workable. I've lived through now maybe four VR cycles. Lawnmower Man was in the Cyberpunk supercar. I think that's probably my first vision of VR. And we're still trapped in that world of the headsets being really bulky. Magic Leap's changed that, but the costs haven't really come down. So I imagine that presenting these shows in a festival environment has an enormous cost for the festival, simply from the hardware costs. Then the training the staff who are going to fit and operate those. How does that work when it comes to, say, Melbourne, and new people have to learn how to plug in a magically, debug it, troubleshoot it when all the things that do happen.
So we've got wonderful staff who have thankfully done this show many times, and they're good at training the staff. And people have a tendency of being excited about doing something new and working with the public, and trying to bring them into something that was otherwise not possible. I mean, this is the funny thing, because like you work like crazy to make whatever it is that you make. And you have a tendency of not necessarily kind of celebrating the fact that people are seeing it. You think of one city, and then you think of the next city, and you think of, okay, how many people are going to wind up seeing it? But the truth is, we've done something that nobody else had ever done, and I only really recently started thinking about it. I think in kind of open or terms that allowed me to appreciate the fact that here upwards of 16,000 people will connect with Ryuichi, which fulfills something that I told him we would do, and that's an incredibly meaningful event, and I'm really, really grateful for it every time. And I think if I had to design it again, I probably wouldn't make it. Have this giant room with these giant ceilings and all of this stuff. But I did. So what you'll see here is something that's very hard to do, and we probably won't design anything like this again ever.
Tell me about this.
Oh God. Okay. So I don't know if you guys care about technical stuff. It's funny because we tend not to talk about technical things because we don't consider Tin Drum to be a technology company. I mean, the point of this is not how the sausage is made, but more an emotional connection. But this is a symposium, and we're talking about things that we have not otherwise talked about. So volumetric capture. Basically, the photographic mesh that I was talking about is in triangles, and it changes 60 times a second. And the reason it's 60 and not more is because you've got to condense all this data down into something about the size of an overachiever hockey puck. And that's the computational pack. And so when you take, let's say, this finger and this table, so the volumetric capture algorithms, they're not that smart, so they don't know the difference between finger and table. And so that means they kind of web, they kind of get imprecise, and it's certainly not something that you could show the world, particularly as a representation of somebody who is no longer there to say, no, I meant to do this. So we had to take the fingers, which were responsible for making this wonderful sound, and isolate them in such a way that fingers and keys were separate. So how do you do that? This is a picture of what's called lightbox data. And so we took many of these pictures of Ryuichi's hands and basically animated them with motion capture, so the little markers. And then Matt and Yo-Yo Monk and others in Tin Drum basically chopped off the volumetric capture at the wrist and added the hands so that the distinct motion was identifiable in the experience. So again, something I've never shown anybody and probably won't show again, but you're seeing it here. That's okay. This is so Ryuichi found all of this to be a riot, and this is in his dressing room, and they are attaching the little motion capture stickers, and he would look at me with this kind of But he was an incredibly good sport, and that's how we got all the data. Another funny moment, and I think this is it for all the pictures that I've never shown anybody.
So should we go back? I've been watching the questions come through. We've dealt with the mocap one. Zoe was asking that earlier on, and she encourages you to keep kind of talking tech. But let's go back. Let's go back to one of the earlier works. We were talking over let's say rejuvenating coffee this afternoon.
Medicinally necessary.
Yes. We're talking about Marina Abramovic. Should we just play this little video?
Is this the Microsoft one?
Yeah, and then we can talk about how this came about, because we have another question here about how does financing work, and how and who do you raise money from? And I felt this might be a good intro to that. Should we go there?
This will be funny. So you
Should we play the video first?
Yeah, play it, and then I'll ask everybody a question that you don't have to answer.
Let's play the video.
I believe that art of the future is art without objects. It's just pure transmission of energy between the viewer and artist.
This was a unique opportunity to take the most legendary artists working in this medium and capture them in such a way that they are translatable forever.
If you're a collector, you're trying to find works that break new ground. We here at Christie's believe that this is that. And it will be the first time that a mixed reality artwork is sold at auction.
There was always a question what you buy when you buy performance. You buy the video or you buy the edition of photographs. Here, you actually can have the artist's presence in your collection.
The first thing that we had to figure out was you had to feel that you were in the room with Marina, not a document of Marina. So the purest expression of artistic intent can happen.
I really want viewer to be with me in the space, in here and now. The life is dealing with what is going to stay after I'm not there anymore. And I can face myself, and that's a frightening experience. I really like you facing your own ghost. There is always this great idea of immortality. Once you die, the work will never die, because the work of art can continue. In performance, the piece is only in the memory of the audience and nowhere else. Here, I am kept forever.
So the obvious question is, does that video suck? And it does, doesn't it? So, so the thing about this, at the time that we did this, the Magic Leap one is one device, but the HoloLens 2 at the time was it had elements that were really, really good. Like you could put it over, like Seb, I could put it on your head and your glasses would be there, and it had this little visor thing. And so that was great. The fact that the visuals kind of broke up on the corners and the colors were unreliable, okay, it's a drag. But so we wanted to use it. And there are like no HoloLens 2s anywhere in the world. So Microsoft, they decide, all right, we're going to sponsor this show at Christie's. And at the time, we were going to do it in LA, New York and Rockefeller Center, and then in London. But so you've got to kind of, all of the ways of describing the relationship with Microsoft are actually in my head. They're kind of, I can't say them to you guys, I don't know you well enough. But suffice it to say, they wanted a lot for not so much. So that video was something that they said, oh, it's going to be a promotional video, it's going to be great. But the truth of it is, they tried to make an ad and get it cheaply, right? And so it's really awful. But again, it's how do you tell the story of a three-dimensional medium through a two-dimensional medium? And sometimes you wind up with that.
So that's 2019, 20.
We actually shot it in 20. We did that show in Beverly Hills while Freeze was going on, and shot it there.
And some of kind of the audience may know that Christie's is doing that AI art auction very soon too, and so
Yeah.
this sort of seems to be a sequence in tech art, that the relationship between technology companies, creators, and a slice of the market creates funds some types of works and doesn't fund other types of works, and it feels like you found a way out of that, perhaps.
Well, I mean, by the time we put it on auction, there's this guy who was at Christie's in London, Stefano Amoretti, and a really thoughtful, true art historian. And he says, all right, so he had seen the life at the Serpentine Galleries, which was the first presentation of mixed reality that the public could get a ticket to. 5,000 people saw it in a week. The tickets went in 2.5 hours. And he said, well, what happens if we try to sell it? I said, I don't know. It never even crossed my mind. He's like, well, why don't we see if it's possible? And then COVID happened, but we sold it in between lockdowns at Christie's in St. James, and it was a curiosity. Does anybody care enough to buy it? And then it turned out they did.
The question I have in terms of running a museum is, how do we preserve these sort of works? How do you preserve works that are complex software artifacts that are also very reliant on proprietary playback equipment?
It's a really good question. Hans Ulrich Obrist once asked me that same thing, and I also had a pretty bad answer. So we probably haven't done enough, if I'm honest. The code is something we spent more time making certain that the rights to that work of art, that they stayed with us no matter what, so you could not repurpose the volumetric capture of Marina for anything other than the performance that she gave. So somebody like Elon Musk can't take her and have her sell beer later, or cars, or whatever. And that's really important. But the preservation is, we think of, you have the files and you have them backed up and all that, but it's actually something that we should probably spend more time with. In here, you have such a broad cross-section. I've never actually seen such a good museum as this one. How did you go about figuring out what to include in the history of kind of presentational hardware and media?
With excellent curators, of course. I think for us, much of what we try to do here is actually with works on kind of loan. So we have a collection, but in fact, different to other museums and galleries, perhaps we build exhibitions with loaned items, which creates a freedom, but complexity. And the collections that we do have, we do a lot of work around video game preservation, which also bleeds into media art preservation. So we're very interested in software preservation and work with some of the universities around this city and the country on building models for that with international partners too. And I think I took Todd on probably like a 20-minute super fast tour of 4 exhibition spaces, and I think what you saw is it's trying to provoke a curiosity amongst an audience to make them think about the things that they see and they have in their pockets, and contextualize them as much as possible within a small period of time to make them want to go further, to make them curious about the world they live in and the media they're surrounded with. And I think there's a lot of links actually between what we've been talking about here and what Jennifer was speaking about in the previous session and many of the other sessions today and tomorrow. It's this, we're surrounded by media and media technologies, and we're almost blasé to the craft and the emotional impact that these have on us, and we need a curiosity of how it works. How does this happen, and where are things heading, and what are the aesthetics of particular technological devices in terms of creation, but also in terms of presentation and sharing as well. I think that's what we're trying to just raise questions about this.
Well, but that's the massive part of it. It's like probably pretty much everybody here between now and whenever you go to bed tonight, you're probably going to watch something. And what is your relationship with that thing going to be? Is it something that you're watching on your phone on a subway? Are there subways in Melbourne?
They're building them.
Okay. Or is it on a giant screen like this, or is it something completely different? Because we have this tendency, because of the evolution of how media works, we've managed to marginalize its impact by elevating its transactional capabilities. And if you think about it, like everybody in this room, anybody who's watching, we are all going to live just a little bit less than we want to, maybe a lot less. And that means every day has this profundity if we allow it to. And so that means every story, every memory, every experience that all of us might have, if we allow it to, has the ability to elevate us, to change our sense of what's possible, and allow us to survive a world that feels absolutely hell-bent on, at very least, daily disappointment. And so if we can make work as a bunch of people who are involved in making work that at least attempts to elevate, to make sense of this contradictory world, are we better for it? Do we take a shot at being better for it? And I think the context of everything that you showed me this morning at least gives us a sense of that's where we came from, and it's probably where we need to get back to.
So Todd, we'll do one more question from the list here before we wrap with the beautiful video that you sent me from the snow. What are you working on now? What's the next thing? Can you tell us about it?
I can. Actually, no, I can. I don't. This is the, well, it's not really an announcement because I didn't know I was going to do this until you and I were having that medicinal coffee. But so with performance, so we did the show with Marina. We did a piece at the V&A with So Fujimoto, the architect, and that was directed by Yo-Yo Monk, who will be here later this week. And that is kind of generative architecture, and it brings up sort of questions about what does a word like design or architecture mean in the first place. We've never done storytelling. And you think, okay, well, how do you create something that nobody's ever done before, but not just for the virtues of having done something first, but actually bringing people an experience that has never been possible in this way. And Simon Stevens is a playwright from Manchester. That's how I know him. And he wrote the one-man Vanya with Andrew Scott that won the Olivier in London last year. He wrote The Curious Incident of the Dog of the Nighttime and won the Olivier and the Tony simultaneously for that. And we were talking for years, and because we've been friends for a long time, and he's like, I don't understand what the hell you do. And then he saw the Marina piece at Christie's in London, and he's like, okay, I understand now. And so he's written this piece. Imagine 200 people in a room, and all of them wearing the device, and 4 actors walking in and sitting directly in front of them. So every individual has the 4 actors speaking directly to them, but the experience is heightened by virtue of the fact that they are in a collective, as you are now. So, and the lead is Ian McKellen. So imagine, and I've done this and it's extraordinary, imagine that guy, and no matter how brilliant you think he is on the screen, you can't imagine him in front of you, and he's staring directly at you. And his first line, and he looks right into your eyes and he says, "Don't panic." So that's what's next. Oh, do you want to know what this is? Do you want to tell?
You tell them. It's beautiful.
So Ryuichi had a piano on his patio in the village, and he wanted to see what would happen if he left it out in the elements, and it returned to the earth. And once it became clear that Ryuichi was not going to be able to return and live in New York, Marina and I have a place in upstate New York, and he said, would it be possible for the piano to conclude its life, its return to the earth there? And on an incredibly cold day, in the January before he died, we brought it up. Piano movers wouldn't touch it, so we had to get regular movers who wrapped it in 3 comforters and like bungee cord and brought it up, and so that piano is going through a process of daily degradation, and fulfilling the promise that Ryuichi had for it, which was to see how long it would take and what the different stages would look like. And with the exception of one Japanese magazine last month, nobody except for people that have come to our place has ever seen it. So I lied, you got one more.
Todd, thanks a lot. It's been amazing.
Thanks, Seb.
Kagami can be seen starting from the 19th of February. So only a few days of install, yeah?
Yep.
7-day install is pretty impressive. Tickets are on kind of sale now. I'm sure you all want to go and see it. Thanks a lot to Asia Topa. Todd, thanks a lot. Come and have a drink if you're still awake.